Live from VentureX Studios, it's JP, Kathy, and the crew.
All right, you gotta love that. We are back for the work week, and we are so glad that you have joined us. Good morning to the crew, and good morning to Dr. Norm Clothier, who is with us every Monday morning from 7:30 until 8. Gives us great medical advice, and boy howdy with Dr. Clothier. Good morning to you, first of all. Hope you had a lovely and blessed weekend.
It was good.
Good. Oh, and that's a good color on you. I don't know that I've ever seen you in pink. It looks really nice.
Well, thanks.
I like it.
Is that all right? Well, yeah, it's a pink Monday, I guess.
There you go. Instead of a manic Monday.
I actually wear a variety of clothes. Yeah, I try to change each day.
It looks great. Yeah, you do?
I am a clothier,
good for you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, being a clothier, I do.
You must. Well, let's go ahead and talk about something else I know you're paying very close attention to. And boy, I was at a big kind of all day into the night political event this weekend, and a lot of talk around the new strain. Are there going to be closings again? Are things going to shut down? Are the mask mandates going to come back in the places they haven't been? There are so many questions. We even had a question of a couple of our local elected officials, which was, will the county be going around and knocking on doors and making sure people have been vaccinated? And then you've got the Texas Democrats who left the state, and 5 of them have tested positive for COVID. It turns out all 5 of them had been vaccinated. So does that mean they've got the new strain? What? Please enlighten us this morning.
Yeah. Well, first, excuse me, let me get my voice going and go back to say that there are a couple things at play there. One, the Delta variant does seem to be more contagious, but not necessarily more dangerous than the other strains. And of course, this is still learn as you go. I mean, we've only known about the virus in total for about 19 months. And then, of course, the Delta variant seemed to have originated from mutations in India. And, we're still trying to figure out all that. But so far of interest, those people who test positive after the vaccine do seem to have the Delta variant, probably. It's hard to say because not every strain is being tested for subtypes. There's just not enough manpower to do that. But most all of them are not being hospitalized. They are sick, but they're not, deadly. The repercussions appearing to be pretty quick. In other words, they're not in the hospital on the ventilator.
Okay.
And that seems to be the reassuring thing. 95% protection is afforded by the vaccine. That leaves 5% of people who can get the infection. Okay. There were a couple of interesting stats. And one, I also want to just mention, you mentioned, will people in Collin County start going door to door to make sure people have the vaccine? It's really to make sure people have the opportunity of the vaccine. There still is not a forced vaccine program.
No, there is not. And these elected officials even said, hey, we're not coming door to door. Here's the information. If you want to be tested, if you would like to, that's the thing.
Yeah,
the counties are to
show they're trying
to give the knowledge. I think everybody's starting to get paranoid again when people start talking about another shutdown, and then people are like, oh, and by the way, the government's coming knocking on your door, and if you don't have a card that says you've been vaccinated, then they're vaccinating you there on the spot. No, they're not. No, just no, they're not.
No.
That's not happening.
We're
still America.
Rumors are always trouble.
Yes.
Yeah. So now I do want to present a few interesting statistics that I think are valuable to us. One is, looking at for instance, the 5 Texas Democrats with the infection, now they've tested positive, there'll probably be more. But notice all the photos of them on the plane had no mask and no social distancing. And those things are still important in particular spots. There's closed air on an airplane. And, remember that the federal rules are that if you're on public transportation, this, of course, was a private charter, but the same rules should apply, practical rules, and that is don't be in each other's airspace and faces without a mask or without regard to social distancing. It's interesting to me that the infection broke out seemingly right after that, because that appeared to be a very blatant disregard of the Democratic president's recommendation and executive order, actually. So that's one. A second, there's a large outbreak in Missouri. We mentioned that last week, of the Delta variant and of COVID in general. And in the past week in Springfield, Missouri, there were 341 hospitalizations with COVID. 340 of that 341 had not been vaccinated. And, you know, if odds like that are not enough to convince people that the vaccine does help, I don't honestly know what will. I think we have, you know, a lot of obstinance about the vaccine. I think it was very proper for Dr. Fauci to mention polio and measles as similar situations where a vaccine came out and the infection, you know, it basically got under control very quickly. And I think when you look at 340 of 341 hospitalizations being unvaccinated, to me, that tells the story. And, you know, my view is that I think the vaccine is very safe, very appropriate. I think it's very much like wearing seatbelts or washing your hands. I think it's, you know, it takes a few seconds. There may be a little minor discomfort for a day. That's a lot better than being in the hospital. I don't know a lot of people that enjoy being in the hospital, not being able to breathe, things like that.
I think the only time people like go into the hospital, Dr. Clothier, that's a happy, joyous occasion is when somebody's having a baby. So that's like all good.
Exactly.
Outside of that, it's like, oh, you know.
And, you know, we recommend and essentially nearly compel the pertussis vaccine for people around newborn babies, because pertussis can be fatal to newborn babies.
That's whooping cough. Right.
And so, you know, I like to emphasize again, it's not weird to have a vaccine. What is odd is to have a worldwide infection that's killing people. It is not odd for medical science to come up with brilliant ways to help limit that infection. And I'd really encourage, you know, the people that are experts online about it, social media, you know, influencers and whatever that don't like the vaccine, they may know better than the rest of the world. I don't think so. And they may know better than medical science, but I don't see their degrees and their study and their work for the last 19 years now on this vaccine. And I think people need to get realistic. If they don't want the world around them shut down again, they need to get vaccinated. And you know, to me, the numbers are clear. There is no 100% protection in medicine. You know, every person at some point will get an infection of some sort, a disease of some sort, and death.
Right.
But when we can prevent things from being the obvious blow right into the face, you know, like this virus, I think it only is reasonable to get vaccinated and limit that infection down to more normal levels. And, you know, it's just going to take some people some time. I think it's unfortunate that a lot of conservatives are extremely opposed to the vaccine, because I'm afraid that a critical number is going to get ill and die, and we're going to have, you know, less influence on those around us as conservatives. And I think that'd be sad. I think we don't want to lose that many numbers of people that really are effective in the political discourse as well as other conservative values.
Well, and let me if I can ask you something really quick again, because we talked about this in the past, but now today it kind of clicked when you talked about the new strain. The incubation period, is it the same as before? Like, let's say you were in Springfield, Missouri, you know, 2 weeks ago when the outbreak started. You know, how long do you have to move past that to know that you're safe? Like, to move yourself out of a self-quarantine, I guess.
Yeah, the current recommendation is symptom-free 7 days.
Okay.
And so that, you know, if you have fever or you have other illness symptoms, that 7 days starts when the fever breaks. And so there's a lot of debate about that, and it's gone back and forth. And obviously, as you're alluding to, we have 14 days originally.
Right.
The current line of thought is 7 days, and that if you're vaccinated and symptom-free, some medical groups have advocated 3 days. That is not the official advice yet. But, there again, because we see a 0.2% spread rate among those who are vaccinated, that takes away that whole asymptomatic viral shatter issue that we've had where people don't know they have the virus or they are so-called pre-symptomatic. In other words, they're going to get symptoms tomorrow, but when they're around people today, they can spread it. People who are vaccinated appear to be spreading that at a 0.2% rate compared to, virtually 100% likelihood in the unvaccinated. So, that's another thing to consider. So another statistic that I think is important to consider that I read, and I think it's a fascinating meta-analysis of the information, is that they have identified 12 people that are on social media who have spread some of the rumors against the virus, like, having a government chip in it, for instance, altering your DNA permanently. Those things are not true. Decrease in fertility, not true. 12 people that ultimately have 59 million followers online have spread that misinformation. And I think, all of us who are in medicine, seeing people get sick, infected permanently, well, I shouldn't say permanently, long-term damage seen to kidneys, lungs, heart, I think we need to help spread the information that there are safe things to do against the virus rather than just get it and see if you die or not. And, I think that's just a critical issue that people need to realize, that all of the misinformation can be tied back to a dozen people who started to spread that on social media, and looking at actual evidence and, not just rumor, not just something you read on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or whatever your social media platform is. Go with real information. And I think it would be very compelling that we could keep our society from being devastated by this virus, because another wave does seem to be coming. Case reports are up 47% over the past 3 weeks in terms of infection numbers. This is starting to feel hauntingly similar to last summer, when we really hoped all the infection increases would go away, that it would drop because of the summer heat. The virus seems to be uncaring as to whether there's summer heat compared to like influenza, for instance, that likes cold weather. And, it's spreading. So if you don't want to end up back in masking and shutting down of businesses and societal challenges surrounding that, then we all need to get on board with helping prevent the infection.
Right. Well, and again, I think a lot of it, because, and I've got friends, I've got family who don't want to get the vaccine, who are concerned for a variety of reasons. So then I go back to something you said: if you're going to be in a contained space, like the Texas Democrats were, who fled, can you tell I'm a little bit angry about that? That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother time.
We all should be, frankly, whether that's Republicans or Democrats.
Amen.
When that happens, people should be up in arms.
I couldn't agree with you more. That this is not a conservative liberal thing. This is you were elected, show up for your job. The taxpayers are paying for you to show up. But anyways, I look at the thing. If you're going to be smart, what I've done is, and I've never liked the mask. I've told you that from the beginning. It always it gets me into a panic attack mode where it sets off my asthma. So what I've noticed that I've done is, in the places where you have a choice, you can either wear a mask or not. Let's say I'm in a grocery store, some place that I shop on a regular basis. I'll put a mask around my, just kind of down below my chin. If somebody's coughing, which that could be allergies, but still, if somebody's coughing, or if somebody's, you've got like a bunch of kids and they're kind of climbing all over mom and they're taking up, 90% of the, cereal aisle, to move past them, I'll put it over my face. And then once I'm free and clear on the next aisle, I'll take it down. So I think everybody just has to be smart about themselves. I know, Dr. Rebecca Good, who's our education expert, she was commenting, she said, good health, good eating and good health, being proactive. And you talk about that a lot of the time. I sent my son off to Boston for music camp, and when we got there and we were buying, sheets and, blankets and towels, we went down the vitamin aisle, and I, got him a bunch of the same kind and even additional probiotics and things that are for his immune system while he's in another state. Just again, sometimes being proactive and thinking about things ahead of time. Maybe if you've got a compromised immune system and you don't want the vaccine, well then don't go to the church service where the most people are sitting. Kind of set over, distance yourself. I think there's things you can do to be smart about it, and the government doesn't need to tell us. Just kind of common sense almost.
Yes, if people would listen to the medical opinion, I think they'd be in good shape. Absolutely. Instead of trying to confuse the two issues. And I would include in that if you're immunocompromised, you should not be afraid of the vaccine, because the vaccine doesn't have any live virus in it. And I think being immunocompromised is all the more reason to have the vaccine, because you need that protection. So, I think there's just misinformation all around. And I think early on, when the virus first started to be known early in 2020, that all political individuals should have just propped a doctor out in front of them and said, here's a doctor, listen to her or listen to him. Don't let politics jade your view of this. And that way, if the doctor is right, they could say, hey, I picked the right person for you to listen to. If the doctor is wrong, they could have said, that scumbag doctor led you astray. The politics still have nothing to do with it. And I think that we let politics overtake it. I think people are very angry about, various recommendations. I would still suggest, think about how you function in life with various rules that either local government or national government have recommended that do actually keep the population safe in many ways, like signals at busy intersections, things like that, are actually government-run programs. And I don't think we have to fear all of the advice from the government. But I also think the medical advice is clear, is get a vaccine, keep your guard up about how long you're in a small area with someone, like a small room, an airplane, a car. Be very careful how long you're in there without circulated air. Try your best to maintain some degree of social distancing. Wash your hands a lot. But the most protective factor, statistically speaking, is the vaccine. And I think, it's just clear how that evidence is coming out. Is it perfect? No. Nothing on earth is perfect. Nothing is 100%. You're going to find the occasional statistical anomaly of something happening. That's true. There also, just as a little reminder, there are fatal car wrecks every day in America. There are about 120. We still drive places. Hopefully we look both ways, put the seatbelt on, pay attention, and we follow the rules that have been set by the government, frankly. And, it gives me no joy to think about governmental control. I don't like it. But I also think there are a lot of people who haphazardly are not going to follow any rule because they think they know better. And we do have to respect other people to keep our nation intact. I think that's also a truth. And I think, if the government puts out an ad that says, please get your vaccine, I don't think you should get angry and not get it. I think if you do get angry and you don't get it, you do need to update your will and make sure your family knows your desires, just in case you're incapacitated in some way, whether on a ventilator in the hospital or just chronically ill, because I think the virus is extremely serious. And I think that's what people need to realize.
Well, and we've got a question from a member of the crew, and when you're talking about, and this is something we've discussed with you before over the years that you've been on our show, and we truly appreciate all the great information you've brought to us. One of the things that I think because you hear about so many people getting this and being on a ventilator, and then I know at least between JP and I and a number of members of the crew, by now you at least know one person personally who has passed away from this, if not more. I know there's more in my case. Well, this has led to the dinner table conversation, between husbands and wives, between, adult children and their parents, and the reverse is true. And that is, is there a DNR? What happens if I'm brain dead? Do you pull the? So this has led to some conversations that families probably should have had anyways ahead of time, so what your loved one's intents are, if they end up becoming very ill. And this isn't just from COVID, this would be from cancer or a car accident or anything. So I think that's a good conversation that's come out of that, because I know that's something you've always encouraged people to do and talk about ahead of time. Now Randy is asking, we've booked a cruise we have a cruise booked in January. Do you have any thoughts on the safety of being on the ship? And then, and Randy said, I thought it would be okay by now, but I'm a bit hesitant. So any suggestions for people going on, like a 3, 4, 7 day cruise, because there's really good prices on those too. I've looked at those myself.
Sure. Well, of course they want to get the business back, and we all hoped it would be fine. I think it's just premature to say that. We're at 19 months into a worldwide pandemic, and I think it's just very hard to say if it'll be safe or not. The best news is between now and January, there'll be a lot of time to assess whether it's safe. I don't think anybody can extrapolate out 5 months at this point. And I hope there's travel insurance, because I think it's very likely that at some point, we're also seeing Olympic athletes have to pull out because of positive COVID tests.
Just saw that. And, that was one of the athletes this weekend. I saw that. Yes.
Yeah, Coco Gauff had to pull out of tennis. She's 17. She's obviously a world-class athlete. She has a team of people who provide her nutrition and exercise, and she's at the top of her game, literally. And I think it's a reminder that this virus can get to anybody. Early in the pandemic, we thought a 17-year-old wouldn't be a big deal.
Right.
Didn't seem to be that much risk. It does seem that the Delta variant is hitting younger people, and whether that's because, they're not vaccinated, and I don't know her vaccine status. It was in the news, but, a lot of more mature individuals have had the vaccine from the age risk standpoint, and a lot of younger people have not yet. And so, of course, we're seeing a higher rate of infection. The highest rate of infection in America right now is age 30 to 39. So, it's hitting the younger people that thought they were sort of protected, initially. So I personally think that it's going to be really hard to see a cruise happening in January because I think that's so many people that have to be healthy in order to get on there. Remember that, with cruises, we've had norovirus before. It's not fatal, but it makes people miserably ill for several days from a GI standpoint. Cruises have always been some degree of suspect because it's close quarters.
Right.
And, that's a challenge.
Right. Well, and again, I think this is with the cruise at this point, I would make sure that I've got either I can cancel it and get my full refund, or that I can, switch the date, maybe to a few months from after that. I think right now it's just so hard to predict what the virus is going to look like. I just think there's so many unknown factors at this point. And you are, I guess, you're in close quarters on a cruise ship,
Yes, and indeed. And I think, part of the problem is nobody can predict a wintertime illness anyway.
Right.
The years we think influenza will be awful, sometimes it's not. Sometimes that's because, by the way, people hear that and more people get immunized, and then it limits the infection spread because vaccines work. And, that some years we think, like respiratory syncytial virus, we've seen quite a bit of summer outbreak of that. We sometimes can predict, a wintertime looks like it'll be worse, and then sometimes it goes by with relatively few cases. And I think January is just a very hard time to predict. I would not count on that working out. Unfortunately, I'd love for it to, for everybody's sake. I just don't think that we're at the point where we can predict that. We've seen a 47% increase over the last 3 weeks in America of cases of COVID, and that's all when everybody started thinking, oh, it's getting safe to be out and around. We've got to respect this virus because the virus doesn't care much about our plans.
I was going to say we're not getting a whole lot of respect back in return. Well, can I plant a seed for a question for next week? We've got.
Sure.
I just heard earlier this morning. I heard about monkeypox. A case of monkeypox in the U.S. And so there may be more of it. More information about it by next Monday. If it's still something that's being discussed, is that something you can tell us more about? Because I was very intrigued.
Sure.
Like,
Oh yeah, why you're intrigued is because it has a cool name.
Yeah, well, I know it's monkeypox. I'm like, oh, can you get it at a zoo? I mean,
No, it's just in America we've been fairly isolated from a lot of worldwide infections because we don't live in third world conditions, and there just are differences too in the mosquitoes and the various risk patterns. So yeah, we can, if it's still in the news, we can talk about it. There was the first case ever in Texas last week.
That's what I'd heard. So I was intrigued, and yes, you're right. It was the name that got me. I was like, monkeypox. Oh, I've got to ask Dr. Clothier about that. Well, Dr. Clothier, thank you as always. We appreciate your information, your input. You stay healthy and have a blessed week.
Well, thank you. You too.
Thanks. All right. Dr. Norm Clothier, our medical expert here on JP, Kathy, and the crew. And just, it's one of those things. And we've got Lathan Watts in studio as my guest co-host this morning to discuss a few fun topics. Do we have his mic live yet, Brett? Are you live now?
Good morning.
There. Now I hear his lovely voice. Actually, I guess I can take these off since I'm off the interview with Dr. Clothier. We were talking about, the new strain of COVID, all the different stuff going on. And that I talked about this a little bit, and I know I wanted to talk with you about this more. So the Texas Democrats, who, first of all, what the heck? I mean, okay, if you decided, I don't want to go to my job this week, and you were like waving and getting the royal treatment in another state, what would your boss do to you?
I would be fired.
Well, and that would make sense because most of us would all be fired if that were the case. It's almost like they're thumbing their nose at Texans. I just, and so first of all, disclaimer, I'm going to say here at JP, Kathy, and the crew, we don't wish the COVID virus on anybody. That's not what this is about. But I tell you what, you've got, and I had just recently traveled to Boston, and I'm not a fan of the masks, but it is what it is. I was in, federal area. I was in the airport and on a plane, and so you had to have the mask on, and the flight attendants were militant about it. I saw several people who had it kind of down below their nose, and I'm watching going, okay, if they're going to get away with that, when I start to nap, I'm going to pull mine down a little bit. And boy, they would wake you up. They'd be like, sir or ma'am, you need to have your mask covering both your nose and your mouth. And I'm like, okay, then I let somebody else get in trouble first, and then before I tried to do it. But, so I get it that they were on, these were private transportations, like a private plane.
Who paid for that, by the way?
Yeah, good question.
And if so, are any of those representatives, I would check their campaign finance reports when they're filed to see if it was listed as an in-kind contribution.
I didn't even think about that. Oh, my goodness. I should have thought about that because there was just a filing period just passed, the July 15th filing period. So somebody do some research on that. Hopefully somebody is, because you're right. Who did pay for that? So I get it. Private plane. Okay, it's, so it's not like you're on, flying out of Love Field or DFW or something like that. So that's the prerogative if you don't want to, if you don't want to. It's so interesting, not funny, ironic, that the Democrats, who have literally been shoving, you have to wear a mask, you have to be socially distanced all the time. First it was going to be, if you're walking your dog by yourself in your neighborhood and nobody else is around you for 3 blocks, you still have to wear a mask. Okay, no, you don't. So funny. So they're all smiling and waving, no mask in sight. Everybody's kind of right on top of each other, getting all close in for these selfies and everything that have gone viral now. And I'm like, okay, first of all, wow, you guys are the ones that are saying no matter what. So if it's your choice, then why didn't y'all choose to wear a mask or socially distance as best you could on a private plane? Which I don't know. I've never been on a private plane. Sorry, somebody invite me. I'd love to be on a private plane like that, but I don't have those kind of invites. You know, I guess I need to be an elected official who doesn't do their job, and then I'll get an invite. Okay, that was my problem. When I was an elected official, I did my job and showed up in Collin County.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, well, that's my own fault then. So anyway, so they're going, you know, to me, it was a very, it looked very hypocritical. I just saw that. I was like, wow.
Sure.
And now it turns out, and I just read this morning, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I read very quickly on my way out of the house this morning that the 5, and again, don't wish this on anybody, but 5 of them have tested for COVID. All 5 of them did have the vaccine. You know, now I think doesn't Kamala Harris, doesn't she have a doctor's appointment this morning, or somebody said she was scheduled for some kind of exam. Again, I just look at this and I'm like, first of all, so that makes me wonder, you know, okay, well, is this the new strain that they got? So if you're vaccinated, are you protected from the old strain but not the new strain? Now, you know, Dr. Clothier always says there's always a small percentage that it just doesn't matter. Same thing with the flu. I don't know how many years I've gotten the flu shot.
Still got the flu.
Still got it, you know, and then still got the strain I was vaccinated for and the other strain. You know, it's like, okay, I'm an overachiever. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on this whole thing and them turning up positive for COVID? And so who's paying for their medical bills while they're not in the state getting treated for COVID? I've got so many questions.
Yeah, and there was a Republican state rep, I think it was Briscoe Kane, who questioned whether or not they actually had it or if this was going to be their next excuse for not coming to work.
Oh, interesting. Interesting, because I guess unless they're showing us a positive test that has their name and all that, which, you know, HIPAA, they don't have to show you that.
Exactly.
Anybody can say they have anything.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, especially because all 5 of them were vaccinated and then they all 5 have it.
Right. And so while
did they expose
there,
anybody else?
Yeah, that was my next question. While they were up there lobbying their fellow Democrats in D.C. to take over the election process for the country, how many of those folks did they meet with need to get tested?
And are they getting tested?
Are they getting tested?
I would imagine that every Democrat and staffer in the administration who, you know, in the Senate, House, White House, who was exposed to them, I know I'd go get tested.
Right.
I would absolutely get tested.
Sure.
You know, I know when I was exposed to somebody who had come into my home who had COVID and I ended up sick and it was just a random thing. Mine was like a stomach flu, didn't have it, but everybody in my house got tested.
Sure.
You know, better safe than sorry. So yeah, you're right. Is that happening? And how do we know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it all starts with them, you know, leaving Texas just to keep the House from doing the House's business.
Yeah.
They don't like, you know, this voter integrity, election integrity bill that's on the call for the special session. So they left town.
And what did they? Lathan, JP and I talked about this, but I've got to bring it up again because it's just so ridiculous. It's redonkulous. That's what it is. When Biden said that that what's being proposed in Texas for elections and for voting, for voter fraud, to prevent voter fraud, it's worse than the Civil War.
Yeah, the biggest threat to democracy since the Civil War. Yeah, we talked a little bit about this on my show when we recorded on Thursday, and I speculated, it's probably because Biden thinks he fought in the Civil War, and
he's like, I remember back in the day.
The worst threat to democracy back when I was fighting in the Civil War, and I was like, somebody should remind him, based on his voting record and his mentor, that if he had voted in the Civil War, he'd have been wearing gray.
Yeah. So hello. Yeah.
So maybe not bring that up.
Maybe not so much. Yeah. I mean, that was, my goodness, that was, and I'm not making light of the Civil War. My goodness, that was a time in our country where you had brother picking up arms against brother.
But that's why that sort of hyperbolic rhetoric is so dangerous, because it does make light of the Civil War. If you're talking about a bill that says you can't have 24-hour-a-day voting and pop-up voting locations, and you're comparing that to an actual Civil War.
And we want your driver's license number, and if you don't have that, we want the last 4 of your Social Security, which is you've got to do that on any given thing you do. Go to the bank, see if you can cash a check without an ID.
Try to buy permanent markers.
Yeah.
Permanent markers and Sudafed. You got to have an
tough.
ID.
It's tough. They're locked up more than voter integrity.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's why that sort of nonsense is actually. You have to kind of laugh to keep from crying, because it is really harmful to the political environment, the debate, whatever you want to call it, because we've seemed to have lost all sense of perspective.
We have.
I mean, if everything is a crisis, if everything is an emergency, if everything is the worst thing since the Civil War, then nothing is.
Well, and you know what? So it's almost like, it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. So it's like, and especially this younger generation, they're getting so indoctrinated with everything every day is a crisis. You wake up every day. What am I mad about today? What am I sad about today? What am I transgressed over and microaggressed and macroaggressed and all this kind of stuff? So there's always something.
What should I be afraid of?
What should I, where should I be afraid to go now? And I can't go to that restaurant because of this, or I better not fly, or I better not this.
I think that's probably
it's scary.
The biggest cultural impact of the last year and a half with COVID is that in certain circles we have made fear a virtue.
Yes.
Like, I am more virtuous. I'm more concerned about this because I'm more afraid of it than you are. And,
so
and if you're not as scared about this,
I'm a more decent human being than you are.
And you have some sense of moral superiority based on how afraid you are of fill in the blank. COVID, the Delta variant, monkeypox, whatever it is, whatever the emergency
monkeypox.
of
I know
the
that
day
just does
is.
sound. I'm not making fun of it. It just kind of sounds fun. I'm just like, monkeypox.
Yeah, but we've turned
Yeah.
fear into a virtue when it used to be
Yes, we have.
a vice. Like, we used to pride ourselves on not being afraid.
Well, and that's one of the things that, as Americans, I feel like we're always striving for the American dream because we're able to still attain it. And so in doing that, you've got to step out of your comfort zone sometimes, and most of the times, especially if you're going to be very successful or do something that's out of the norm, you've got to say, you know what, I'm going to push fear aside. And you hear this all the time. I pushed fear aside. I took a leap of faith and I did this, trusted in God, and I did this. And that's always like a good thing. And now it's like, well, you're not scared. Well, I'm going to shame you on social media until you are pulverized.
Yeah. Courage isn't the absence of fear.
Yeah.
It's going ahead and doing it anyway.
Yes. Exactly.
In whatever that thing is that you're afraid of.
Exactly. And it's just, it's so, it is so, it's heartbreaking. It's so sad that we've got leaders who, president included, who are helping with the gaslighting and the fear mongering and all of these things. And, something's gone horribly wrong when we're in that place.
Yeah, I agree. And, you hear lots of talk about how divided we are as a country, along whatever line they're talking about, race, sex, class, gender, whatever it is. But to me, that's when I first saw that picture of the Dems on the private plane leaving town. It sort of reinforced for me the only real division in this country is between the governing and the governed.
Oh, that's a powerful statement, Lathan. Very powerful.
Because they live a life I'm unfamiliar with. Just like you said, if I wasn't happy about something going on at my job and I just decided I'm not going to show up, then I wouldn't have a job.
Right. Natural consequence to not showing up for work.
Yeah.
And also, it's one of those. It's kind of like, Oh, I went to the Ranger opening game. Oh, I'm sick. And then all of a sudden you're on the Jumbotron.
Right.
Texas Rangers opening,
Right.
baseball day. Okay, well, guess what? You got busted. And to me, I feel like they're all on the big Jumbotron of life, thumbing their nose at us in Texas who are going to work and doing our job,
Yeah.
saying, I don't have to do mine. And
Right.
I'm going to get treated like a rock star.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's sort of my point. I mean, the biggest gap, if you want to call it that, or gulf between two groups of people is between the governing and the governed.
Yeah.
There's a completely different system of criminal justice.
Yep.
If you and I had done, or if there was evidence of close to any of the things as far as a corruption
Yes.
in the private sector that we saw, say, with Hunter Biden and pipelines and everything else,
Oh, yeah.
I'd be in jail already.
I see it, and that's the thing. So the people who are in charge, and you try to think about, America. We were founded so we could all be, we could be equal and have, freedoms. Not that you would be equally successful. You all have an equal opportunity. We
Right.
all wake up the same way every day, and each of us have a chance to go out and just kill it, just
Yeah.
rock and roll.
And equality under the law.
Yes. Yep.
But like Orwell said in '84, some of us are more equal than others. Like, say, somebody like Lois Lerner.
Yeah.
If,
Yep.
if you abused your authority in the private sector the way she had abused hers in the government
Yeah.
sector,
Yeah.
you would be in jail.
Yep.
That is the biggest divide in this country right now, the governing and the governed. And some of those in the governing are constantly preaching about every other type of division so that they can tell you, well, keep me in power so I can fix that, when the real thing is you keep them in power and they live a completely different life from yours.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not in the same ballpark
We're
as
talking
the average American.
They've got their third vacation home is 5 times the size of my one home that I have.
Right.
The founding fathers did not put elected office positions into place in order for you to become wealthy off of them.
Of course not. It was never intended to be a career.
Right.
They believe in the concept
Yep.
of public service, the Ciceroan ethic. Right?
Yep.
You're called to serve, you go home. If you're called back, you go back.
Right.
It was never supposed to be. But we've got a president, a Senate Majority Leader, and a Speaker of the House who have never had a real job in their life.
No.
Never worked in the private sector
to me,
at all.
I have a real hard time with, now granted, JP, who he's in training today, he was elected at age 18 to serve as a JP, did a fantastic job, but he was always very much with students on service. He was literally every weekend, boots on the ground, at a church, at a nursing home, at wherever the case may be, at the home of an elderly person who needed their their pavement that was cracked, fixed,
Right.
whatever the case may be, because you've got to be in touch with who you're serving, and his was also a full-time job. These people who have literally. And make a killing. We're talking, they're worth millions and millions and millions of dollars, and their kids are worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. And so I'm like, wait a second. You're scamming the American people at this point.
Yeah, it's a pseudo aristocracy is what it is.
Yeah.
It's like we've basically created one, which is, it's point blank in the Constitution. There are no titles of nobility or
Right.
Hereditary titles.
Right.
We're trying to avoid that.
Tell Hunter Biden that,
But we have basically established one. And it's not to say that, serving your country in elected office isn't a noble thing. It is. It is supposed to be service.
Right. It is supposed to be service. And so you lose sight of that when you're in it to win it, to make millions. Leilani says, okay, how do we fix this? She said, I'm so over the division. Do we have to attack? Do we have to have another attack to be united again? that's a scary thought. Do we
Yeah.
have to have something in common? Because it's like right now, everybody's fighting against each other. What does something jarring have to happen? I mean, well, heck, wasn't the pandemic and being shut down, wasn't that jarring enough to bring us all together, and it made us worse?
Yeah, it maybe should have been, and one thing it might have done is exposed to a lot of people who serving them in government has sort of that dictatorial impulse,
Right.
Because and people have to be honest enough with themselves to say, even the people, quote, on my side,
Right.
because they've got an R by their name doesn't necessarily mean that they're acting the way I expect my elected officials to act.
There
And
are
if they
plenty
don't,
of ours that right now you and I we won't. We'll go into it right now. We don't have time, but there's plenty of ours right now that
Right.
I'm like, are you kidding me?
yeah, and if they don't, then it is up to the people that elect them to
got
say,
it.
then I'm voting
Yep.
for somebody else next time.
Yeah.
And I don't, whether it's in a primary or, in a general, the only way, like the question, and,
Right.
I think the only way, we didn't get to this point overnight, you won't fix it overnight, but
Right.
the only, it's real easy to point the finger at the people in office and forget that we're the people that put them in office.
And then you look at voter apathy and the low turnout. I think of just like the last municipal election, and we even had the only time you have a good turnout in a municipal election is when liquor's on the ballot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sad, but true.
Or
It's the
if
only
the,
time you're guaranteed,
or if the-
10% or more.
Or if the school board puts a new bond package,
Yes.
so they can go into further
Right.
debt,
Further
to
debt.
add 10,000 seats to
Yeah,
the
kick
football
that
stadium.
that can down the road. Yeah.
But I think the only way this changes over time is, we the people, the folks that vote, because politics goes to those who show up. All right, you talk about low voter turnout. I mean, I agree. More people should vote, but there's a lot of people out there so uninformed. I'm totally fine if you don't vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody's like, we should be able to just vote. Like, you should be able to vote on Snapchat. And it's interesting. And I know Cleo's online. She was an election judge. She said socialism is the shortcut to dictatorship. Boy, howdy, that's true. It creates a new ruling classes and more serfs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Socialism is the communism starter kit.
It is. And anybody who doesn't understand that, they're like, no, that's like the nice version of it. Oh my gosh, no. They're just like, oh, that's a nice drug dealer. There is no such thing. Right. Ann Guzman said, you mean somebody actually did a little something? And then Coach Quigley said, equality is not their objective. Control is their objective. And I agree with that. So let's take this. So we're talking about the fact that these are folks who we put them in office. We can take them out. And getting back to the thing, like I was talking with Cleo, she was an election judge. There are younger people who came and they said, oh no, I registered to vote on Snapchat, or I registered to vote on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I wish I could say we're making this up.
Yeah.
No, I have election judges who were like, oh, Kathy, you'll never believe this. And I'm like, it hit me. It's hard to surprise me nowadays. So I'm thinking, okay, probably not a good thing you're voting this cycle, because, oh my goodness, I've always, and I know we can't do this, but just, I want to like ask people, okay, what are the three branches of government? Before you go vote for president, just tell me one thing. What are the three branches of government?
Right.
You know, I mean,
yeah. If we started to require actual civics in high school, that's step one.
Right.
I mean, why not make it a graduation requirement that you have to pass the same test that people becoming citizens in this country have to pass?
And you know what? It's interesting.
That's the subject matter that they're tested on.
And we've talked about this on the show before, and there are folks who cannot pass, who are out there voting, who are holding elected office, who could not pass the citizenship test. That's kind of a sad statement. Fred says you can't complain if you don't vote. I'm always like, hey, you haven't earned your right to gripe if you haven't voted. Okay, so we're talking about, liberty, which is what we're desperately hanging on to here in America, versus dictatorship and the lack of freedom. And let's talk about Cuba a little bit and about what's going on over there. Read something new. I'd sent you an article about a woman who does a podcast. and I've got to, I'm literally going to watch this during my lunch break today. Nicole Hannah Jones, she has a podcast. She said that Cuba is among the most equal countries because of socialism. I'm like, what?
Yeah, they're all equally miserable.
Yeah, okay. And not laughing at them being miserable, because that I can't even imagine how horrible that is. But my goodness. Okay. So yes, everybody's equally in a sucky position.
Yeah, they're all equally poor. They're all equally starving. They're all equally dealing with a ridiculous, bureaucratic, ineffective healthcare system. They're equal. If that's your goal, there it is, and it plays out on the world stage everywhere it's tried. This is, I've said before on my show, and apparently pretty much anybody can get a podcast these days, right?
We love yours, though. The snarky parenthetical every Friday evening.
So if you, the old phrase, like those that don't study history are doomed to repeat it.
Right.
I'm more of a fan of the phrase that those of us who study history are doomed to watch everybody else repeat it.
Yes.
While we stand around screaming, please pick up a book.
Yeah. I know.
This is the end result everywhere this system of government is put into place.
Yep.
And if you want true equality,
right,
where everything is equal, nobody has more material possessions than anybody else, everybody has free government health care, everybody has the exact same housing, everybody has everything equal, then check yourself into your local prison. Yeah. Because that's the only place in America where it exists.
That's a good point. I never even thought about that, but you're right.
Proof positive.
Same meals, same square footage, same cot.
All paid for by the government.
Same outfit. Yep, all provided by your government. Absolutely
free to you, right?
It's a really good point.
Because you cannot, just like you said, if you have, if you truly understand the concept of equality, as it's mentioned in the Declaration, in the Constitution, it is equal rights, equal equality in the eyes of the law.
Yes.
It's about the equal value of every individual human being because they're created in the image of God. They have the same equal rights because of that. That when free people exercise that freedom, they're going to exercise it in different ways, and it is going to result in different results.
Right.
That doesn't mean that they don't have equality.
Right.
This is why you also hear people on the left these days, they're not even talking about equality anymore. They've shifted to talk about equity.
Oh, and okay, and that's another. We need to have you back on literally just to talk about that, because what you start, especially those of us who are involved in the media, you start looking at what is the buzzword that's out there that literally you hear it over and over and over. You don't, if you're just going about your normal day, you really don't pay attention to it and you don't notice it, but all of a sudden you're using that word. What word is being shoved down your throat?
Right.
And equity is big. As a matter of fact, and then I've got to mention this about, we're having such a lovely day, but I do have to mention something AOC said about Cuba. She said, they said AOC continues to demonize and blame the U.S. for suffering on Cuba. What the what? But here's the thing. She makes headlines with that. Right. She's got all of these lemmings who literally are following her off a cliff, believing like, oh, well, you know what? We are so mean and we've got so much, and it is our fault. How are we being blamed for Cuba?
Right.
I mean, seriously, the people over there who are protesting in Cuba, do you know what the majority of them
American
have?
Flags.
Yes, the symbol of freedom to somebody in Cuba who is oppressed is our flag.
Exactly.
So how are we the bad guys?
Yeah, I mean they didn't build basically cardboard boats and risk death to try to get 90 miles north to America.
Yeah.
Because everything is so terrible here.
Right.
Let me flee to the country that's responsible for my plight.
Yes.
That makes no sense whatsoever.
And that's what's crazy.
How many people in Miami do you see building homemade rafts to try to get to Havana?
No, zero. No, and it's some of the speeches I saw at the Collin County Lincoln Day dinner. Oh, and by the way, congratulations to Terry Green, who won the John McVeigh Award. I was very proud to present her with that award this weekend. So congratulations, Terry. She's going to be talking about border security here in a few weeks on our show. I look at this and I'm like, okay, a lot of the speakers who spoke, like Rick Green and some different folks who spoke over the weekend said, okay, you've got to look at the country people are trying to get into versus the countries people are trying to get out of. And like you said, nobody over in Florida is going, how the heck do I get over to Cuba?
Right. And these people coming from Cuba, the ones trying to get out right now,
Right.
those are actual refugees.
Yes.
And
thank you. Let's talk about the definition of a refugee.
right, because all the people that are making the trek from Central and South America just to get to the southern border because they've been told by our government, if you can just get here and claim you're a refugee, well, then we'll let you in while we're sort of evaluating things, and maybe you show up to your court date, and maybe not. Violence is bad, of course. They come from violent countries. They come from countries that are, riddled with corruption and drug cartels. But but throughout our history, just because your country is in a bad way doesn't necessarily make you fit the definition of what a refugee is.
Right.
It's and I'm I don't have the black and white letter definition in front of me, but it is intended to be. You are fleeing a country where the government of that country would persecute you, where your life is in danger from your own government.
Yes.
Because of either your religion or
lifestyle or whatever the case.
Your ideology, because you've spoken out against the government.
Right.
Those people in Cuba are real refugees.
Right.
I know. Nobody's saying that the folks coming from Central and South America, that we shouldn't be sympathetic to them. But there's a process. There's a different process for refugees versus someone who wants to immigrate to this country.
Yes.
And this administration, just the other day, I forget who it was, a Biden administration official, basically said, to those of you in Cuba, turn around. Go back.
And so I'm like, wait a second. These are truly people.
These are the actual refugees.
This is who.
Versus everybody else.
This is who we need
sneaking
help.
Across the southern border.
Well, all the drug cartel
right.
coming over, tattooing, minors, so they can know who gets what drug money from which branch of the cartel. That's not what we're dealing with in Cuba. And the fact that the administration is ignorant to that, either they're ignorant, which that's scary, or it just doesn't fit into their narrative. Because most likely, if you come over here, if you've got like a Rafael Cruz who came over from Cuba, my goodness, he is the biggest flag waving, a proud American there is. Well, what do those people usually do? They vote with the Constitution. They usually are more of a conservative type style personality. So more than likely, if they vote, they are going to vote conservative or Republican.
Right.
So does this, again, at the end of the day, all come down to who's going to vote and who's going to support me? Same reason they've got, maskless in D.C. on parade, not doing their job here in Texas, keeping retired teachers from what they're calling the 13th paycheck for the year.
Mm-hmm.
Get back here and at least vote on that. Come on, folks.
Yeah.
But they won't.
Yeah, it does come down, I think, unfortunately, to an effort to sort of have a constant influx. Basically, because we are the freest country in the history of the world, we have also been the most prosperous.
Yes.
But if your political power is built on telling folks in poverty that you will fix it if they'll just vote for you, then you constantly need more people in poverty.
Right.
And when our economy succeeds,
your constituents need to grow.
Exactly. When our economy succeeds and people are lifted out of poverty, if that's a threat to your actual power base, then what do you have to do? Well, you got to import poverty. So you got to go to the countries
so sad
south of us, north of us,
and
wherever
bring
it may
people
be,
in,
and bring people in.
And here's the thing, Lathan, you're bringing them in, and instead of presenting these people with the American dream, you're keeping them dependent on the government.
Exactly. It's just a little. Just
That's
a
not
high,
the American dream.
It's just a higher standard of living. Like poverty in America is a little bit better than the poverty
but it's still poverty.
But it's still poverty, right? So every time you talk about immigration, it seems anyway, in public debate, the question always centers around what is best for the immigrant.
Right.
Well, if America is, and I believe it, the freest, most prosperous successful country in the history of the world, where there is more freedom and opportunity here than anywhere else in the history of the world. If you start with what's best for the immigrant, the answer is always the same. Let them in, of course, because this is the place where there's more opportunity than there ever has been. But every country in the world, every sovereign nation in the world has a right to determine who comes into their country. And the question of immigration, legal or illegal, should be framed around what is best for that country.
Right.
Because then you can arrive at a multitude of answers based on the individual who is coming. Is this skilled labor? Is this person a PhD from India?
Yeah, right.
Or is this unskilled migrant type labor that we already have?
Right, that we have too much of, kind of thing.
It's not to say that we're unsympathetic to their plight.
No.
It is to say, like, look, if this is this is the best country in the history of the world, but the whole world can't live here.
Right. Okay? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, at some point, I mean, you run out of space. I mean, logistics-wise, you got to look at it. Well, and I know we're getting ready to hear the music here and everything, and gosh, we could talk about this for another hour. And something I'd like to talk with you about in the future as well is all I see are more and more and more help wanted signs. The last few places that I've gone to eat, either for like a friend's party or just took my mother out the other day, went to an IHOP, and they're short staffed. I mean, it was one of those things where we went, it was not a lunch, dinner, breakfast time. It was in between on purpose. Still had to wait. Service was slow. Now, that was not the waiter's fault. The waiter was...
They were understaffed.
They were pretty much working the whole restaurant, but then part of the restaurant is closed down because they just know, and it's not because of a COVID thing, it's because there's not enough workers out there. So what do we do with that? This is becoming a real big problem. So somebody posted on social media, the whole country's understaffed. Be nice to the people who show up. So I know I'm super boy. We gave that waiter a big old tip, like a 50% tip for what we had, just because thank goodness there was somebody there to serve us, so we could go enjoy time together, not having to cook and do dishes, kind of a thing. So how can people see you every week on this network?
JPK Network. Check it out on Fridays. 5:30ish is usually when it posts.
Time for your first glass of wine.
Yeah, exactly. Check it out on the way home, maybe.
The snarky parenthetical. Well, Lathan, it's always a pleasure to have you in studio. Thank you so much. We wish JP good luck with his training today. Love y'all, and then we will see you again on Wednesday. And stay tuned for Heart and Soul of Texas Women coming up after this show. Love y'all. Have a blessed week. Mwah.